everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on AGI, World Talent Economy Forum. We are heavily involved with Asia Pacific and around the world uh, uh, for uh, for doing research, organizing conference, and developing academy for industry and academic relationship. Today we will discuss on AGI. We have our world famous speaker, Dr. Tamanna, Professor Robin Durley, and Madam Ali Rice. Uh, Uh, so first, I would like to give chance Dr. Tamanna Khosle.
Yeah. So artificial general intelligence is, it is something which is it's a field which is being theorized upon right now. Research is being conducted, and so what these people are trying to do is understand, extend the power of, make it a strong AI, a strong AI, not a weak AI, which is going to be human centered, whatever humans kind of sort of give instructions, they follow. They will themselves have the brain to do some perform certain skills. So that's a strong AI. So it's like AGI is a theoretical pursuit to develop AI system that possess autonomous self control, a reasonable degree of self understanding, and the ability to learn new skills. So it can solve complex problems in a jiffy, and context that were not taught to them at the time of their creation. So the chat GPT, for example, the smaller version of something being attempted right now. So I guess fictions have a lot of talk about all these things in movies as well as books. Like strong AGI has been researched, spoken about in a fictional manner also. But now the time has come of like when they can help human beings to develop this technology and bring about, for example, if suppose a man, I guess that's something else, but like if a man wants to get pregnant, so the robots can, can they get pregnant? So that questions, those things have to be seen, like if that kind of performances these new AGI can do, or help the humans do that, because people right now are experimenting with everything. I mean, as far as the brain can go, they are like thinking wide, you know uh, to lead a fulfilled spiritual or non-spiritual whatever life, but a fulfilled life. So AGI can definitely help towards that. So I'll like give the floor to others. This is my opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Rob.
So for a long time, AGI was thought to be the kind of the holy grail with regard to artificial intelligence. Where we are right now is something called narrow artificial intelligence, and that's where you've got a set of AIs that are very focused on mostly singular or isolated tasks. Generative AI, which is a subset of narrow AI, but could be seen as a bridge to AGI, has proven to be far more capable than that. However, you still need a training set that has to be built if you're using a large language model, and the large language models are what found today's generative AI. And of course, that's the Chat GPT capability that we've been talking about in the past, and the speed in which generative AI has been advancing has been unprecedented. We started off this year really not talking much about artificial intelligence at all, at least in a practical standpoint, more theoretical. Yeah, we had products like IBM's Watson in market, but they were expensive, highly focused, and they didn't seem to have the broad capability we were looking for in an AI that could be put in to do almost any task. But generative AI popped up, and suddenly it could do a lot of things that AGI was thought to be only able to do. It could talk to people. It could fool researchers into thinking that it was intelligent and had cognitive capabilities. And there's still an argument of whether or not it makes a difference that it doesn't, because if a third party can be convinced that an AI has cognitive capability, does it really make a difference to that third party whether it doesn't or not? And it certainly has opened up a whole realm of thought as to whether or not, I mean, as we determine what does or does not make somebody cognitively aware of their existence, the delineations of what makes a human or not is going to be challenged as we go forward. I mean, is a sociopath or a psychopath a human? Because a machine and a psychopath and a sociopath have an awful lot in common in that there's really no inherent empathy in a machine. And if you eliminate empathy from a person, is the person a person? So we've got, even with the understanding that the word artificial intelligence, or at least artificial is applied this way, may be a misnomer. My personal view is either something's intelligent or it's not. But the concept of artificial intelligence at least begs the question that something could not be intelligent but could convince you that it was. And again, to that third party, it may not make a difference. Right now, we're a generative, narrow artificial intelligence. We're evolving to AGI. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, I think about 2 weeks ago, popped up and said he thinks we'll have AGI within 5 years. Now, that was big because up till now, we were thinking that AGI wasn't going to be a thing until the 2040s or 2050s. And remember, anything that's out longer than 10 years, it's kind of on a wish and a prayer. I mean, we really thought back in the 1920s, we would have flying cars all over the place well before the 2000s, and clearly missed that bar by at least 20 years. But so predictions out over 10 years are generally, as I say, wish and prayers. But bringing into 5 years, that 5 years is a predictable time frame. That means you are fairly certain you can get it done. And NVIDIA has been the leader, at least in this current wave of artificial intelligence technology, or at least they were until OpenAI hit the scenes, and suddenly OpenAI is everybody's golden child. But OpenAI has had some issues, and we've certainly seen with OpenAI's ChatGPT, it's had some fairly severe issues of late, being accused of being lazy and somehow losing its math capability. About 3 months ago, tests were showing that ChatGPT 4 was about 98% accurate in terms of mathematical calculations. Now it's running closer to 3%. Suggesting that something is corrupted it rather badly, and it's being highlighted as being lazy. You can ask it to do something, but it may refuse to do it, or may take an excessively long time to actually accomplish the task, which is problematic. It's showing a growing pain with regard to this technology, which is moving incredibly fast. We're already talking about ChatGPT 5, and we haven't even exited the ChatGPT 4 ramp. So it's moving fast, and as we talk about this move to AGI and how much the speed of its coming to market is increasing, the reason for that is because AI has started to write itself. The tools that were initially brought to market by companies like Microsoft were directly targeted at low-code, no-code kinds of development, which means the AI is doing some of, most of, or all of the work in terms of creating the new application or program, and that same capability is being turned on AI itself. So in a way, creating this, we'll call it a virtuous loop for the moment, but a loop where AI's speed is being used to enhance and to advance AI's evolution, and it's very likely we could start seeing generations of AI monthly shortly. We've certainly got now set biannual releases, and something that before now had probably been more measured in parts of a decade as opposed to parts of a year. And we're nowhere near the acceleration rate where this would max out. I just published on the concept of logarithmic advancement, because it won't be linear. That if you get an accelerator, you apply the accelerator to the very thing it's accelerating, and then use that thing to advance the accelerator, you're going to get a massive increase in the rate that you're advancing. And that's what we're likely to see going forward with AGI. Now, after AGI, you've got ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. So if AGI is really where we get to kind of parity with people, at least that's where it's been positioned for me much of the time, is AGI is when you have an artificial intelligence that could be dropped in to a variety of tasks and can perform the task as if it was a person. Yeah, granted, if it's a physical task, you need some kind of a robotic case or mechanism to do it. But if you're just talking about interfacing with computers, doing things like accounting, even some forms of audit, financial controls, security, at least with regard to visual security and deploying resources, that can all be done with software. You don't necessarily need a physical construct to do it. Yeah, you need servers too, but the constructs have been under development for years. We now have, beginning of the year, we didn't have any humanoid robots that were anywhere near capable. Tesla's now showed their second generation of humanoid robot, and at least it looks good in its alpha form. And just recognize we weren't close to this at all. Last year, Boston Dynamics had a series of robots that look kind of cool, but their really successful ones were more emulations of animals than they were people. Now we're getting close to being able to create Android-like robots that could be controlled by a central artificial intelligence, and they could do varied tasks. Be aware that we had a prior test of this about a decade ago with a robot called Baxter, about a $23,000 robot that was designed to replace line workers, and the industry discovered that people were cheaper, which I think probably speaks more to how we're underpaying people than the capabilities of robots. But the end result is it failed, not because it couldn't do the task, it's just people were cheaper to do those individual tasks, even though the tasks that it was slated to do were tasks that shouldn't have been that great for people, highly repetitive manufacturing line tasks that should have given the robot a significant advantage in terms of performance, longevity, and shift length. And yet people, because they were cheaper, outperformed the robot. We're going through a world of change right now. But so after artificial general intelligence, we have artificial superintelligence, and that's the one that really, if you've been watching, a lot of the researchers are complaining that we're going too fast and that we may be ending the race. It's the artificial superintelligence they're concerned about. It's a set of technologies that not only could replace people, but where that replacement would vastly exceed what people can perform. And of course, that would create a whole series of socioeconomic problems that we would have to overcome, including what these people that are now unemployed are going to do, how we're going to feed, clothe, and house them, and in some cases maybe retrain them going forward. Fortunately, I think we've got some time. If AGI is out 5 years, artificial superintelligence is going to be off in the future after that. But again, the concern is we have AIs developing themselves, is that gap may be closing faster than we think. It's very possible that Jensen isn't being aggressive at all in his prediction. He may, in fact, be conservative because he's talking about a linear advancement from where we are. And as I mentioned, we're kind of on this logarithmic scale in terms of advancement, short of the hiccups that we're seeing with ChatGPT-4. So our one hope here is that the biases that are going into the training sets, and I should point out these training sets are expensive. Trying to create a ChatGPT-4-like solution with a large language model costs about $100 million per pop. And that's out of the price range of most companies and certainly the vast majority of individuals. But that price is coming down, and we're learning how to do more with less. So using a much narrower, much smaller language model, we've discovered we can do most of everything we wanted to do in many cases with a large language model, reducing the cost of development from 100 million down to 10 million, and perhaps quite a bit below that going forward. Another shortcut has been using the pile. And the pile is this massive open source information that can be used for training that exists in the wild. And you can use this data without incurring a great deal of the cost associated with a targeted training set. But the problem with the pile is there are lots of contamination in it. And the end result is your accuracy your cost comes down dramatically, but your accuracy falls just as dramatically, and that creates these artificial intelligences that by any measure might be insane. The biggest concern, of course, is the one Elon Musk is creating using the data set that surrounds Twitter, which we all know is highly biased and corrupt by its very nature, and the concern that he's the first one that's actually actively trying to create or may create an AI that is hostile to people. It is interesting to note, since Elon Musk is almost an extreme conservative, that the first thing his AI did was declare itself woke and take a very liberal path to its decision making. They're back to trying to figure out what went wrong with their AI. And the strange thing is, nothing may have gone wrong with AI. It just didn't accept the bias that was inherent in its creation. So some fascinating things going on the market. And I'll end my opening comments with that we're rolling these AIs to market incredibly quickly. They're advancing far quicker than we ever saw in the past. And the end result is we're creating an awful lot of these things that may turn out to be hostile. And our goals going forward should at least partially be along the lines of what do we do if one of these things jumps the rails and starts doing a lot of harm. The one industry that is actually loving this technology that scares the hell out of me is the malware industry. And I think this should be a much larger concern than it is. Then I'll pass the hat. Ali, you're up.
Okay. I was going to talk about the creative side of AI actually, and how already it's astonishing what AI can produce. And as I was looking at Midjourney, and you can just give it a sentence and it will create something that's incredible. But I think the thing is that talking to my son, essentially, as far as I understand, they trawl from other images that exist. So the artificial intelligence doesn't actually create anything. It just finds images and amalgamates them together. And so there's concerns as well as there's the immediacy of it is incredible. But as an artist and a creator in an industry that's, so I really value talent and skills. And I think AI is getting to such a kind of an advanced level that in some way it's kind of giving people skills that enabling people that don't have skills and talent access. But it's also it's creating an industry that it's hard for an individual artist to compete with. So, and I would argue that, those images don't necessarily have the same quality as something that's hand rendered or, that's envisioned and created. So, and I think the same things with, I think it's poetry, the chat GTP, I haven't experienced, but I just think there's kind of a generic way of doing things, or something generic doesn't necessarily have the original quality that comes from an artist that's answering a commission or a contract, or so I think but I think it's incredible what it can do. So as much as I admire it, and that's obviously with the film industry and Hollywood, the fact that people can so that they're trying to kind of get ownership of an actor's voice and the way they look, and and the deep fake that we've talked about. I think the thing is that the intellectual kind of property that you've got and your kind of face and your voice and that makes you. The reason that people are selected is because they're an individual and they fit whatever So I think it's a dangerous field, really. So as ever, I'm always really cautious, and I think the efficacy of what happens and how things are generated and the ethics behind what happens is always something that troubles me. So yeah, so that's my first views.
Thank you. We have our new speaker, Professor Nozrul from North-South University. Thank you for joining today's session. Professor David Smith, if you allow me, then I want to give chance Professor Nozrul. He is a very famous scholar from Bangladesh. I think he is Australian Bangladeshi. Professor Nozrul, we are discussing about AGI, Advanced General Intelligence. We have many famous speakers from around the world. So what you want to discuss about AGI, and you can share your views about your research lab.
Well, thank you, Sharif, and hello to everybody. Actually, to tell you frankly, I have, because Sharif has actually brought me into a new area. I have no idea clearly that what is AGI. I am an agricultural economist, agricultural resource economist, and I do research mostly on the policymakers and decision makers, and do different types of economic modeling, social studies, and all these things. So, and Professor Sharif is actually, I think he's pulling me to a new world. So I thought that I join and in fact, learn about this artificial intelligence and all other things. Perhaps we are already using this. So just to give you a little bit background of my research work that I do, I have established a Agribusiness Center of Excellence in Northwest University. I have worked in Australia for almost 40 years. Originally, I'm from Bangladesh, and at the moment, I am affiliated with the University of Western Australia. I work for the Department of Agriculture and Food in Western Australia, and I have established a Center for Excellence, as I have mentioned, in collaboration with the University of Western Australia. And my main purpose is to develop capacity, that means the training and obviously technological based. At the moment, I am assessing the adoption and diffusion of agriculture technologies in Bangladesh. So that's how actually I came to know Sharif, and since then I think we are working, and he is actually giving me lots of new ideas. So yeah, that's what actually I have to say. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Nozrul. Professor David Smith, you are from ETT and you have a lot of innovations in your business incubation center. And you know that World Talent Economy Forum, we are launching our business incubations around the world. I think in Australia, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Singapore, in Dubai, in India, definitely in Bangladesh. So what do you think? Professor Nozrul has very good center for excellence, especially for agriculture. AGI can be used in agricultural sector in the future, or how does it work? How it will be benefit for emerging economy?
Oh, sure. Different types of AI, and particularly as we progress towards AGI, and as Rob talked about, really the super AGI going down after that, there's a lot of opportunities. Most of the AI today really is a pattern matching set of AI, and it is really good at doing patterns with data and stuff, and identifying things from their trained data sets, like Rob was talking about, to match the question, make an inference from it. So they don't think for themselves today. We're beginning to see that as you go to AGI and things. So one of the things that we can say where we are today and where AGI is supposed to make the big difference is AI today understands data, but it doesn't understand concepts. And for it to excel in the areas that you're talking about, Sharif, we need to move up beyond it just understanding data into concepts. It's like in the economics and microeconomic areas. When I was back as an assistant dean in the business school at UT Austin, we could teach the data really well to the students, but the concepts, and particularly the concepts of a dramatically changing world with geopolitical changes, with technology changes, and with the pace of these changes increasing so dramatically and moving to a total, truly global environment, it's the concepts that really help separate what you can do with the data. And in many other industries, that way is true. We talk often about, because of digitalization, ubiquitous communications, we live in a very different world. And how everything has become a system of systems. Become a system of systems, and how, particularly in the startup world you talked about, Sharif, and in the economic world that, Professor, you were talking about, the fact that everything has become a system of systems, the interactions have become much more complex. You have to examine broader and broader sets of data, and you have to pull in concepts that are often outside of your own vertical, outside of your own experience. And the only way to do it using our current AI, is to be able to move further towards this concept of AGI. I kind of agree that the definition of AGI is changing a lot right now. and we're going to be working towards it. So that's kind of where I think that's going to your question, Sharif. There is not going to be any industry today that is not going to be touched by some form of AI. And truly, AGI is challenged because AGI has to understand, like I said, not just the data, but it has to understand the concepts. And it has to understand the care about, so it has to understand tangibles and intangibles. And those are the challenges I see going forward with it, Sharif. So I think that's probably my answer to your question now.
Thank you. Professor Nazrul, as you helping to develop human resources in Bangladesh, what do you think? What is the preparations of Bangladeshi students about AI? Or what type of strategy you have to develop some human resources for that particular area?
Well, the strategy that we have, it is in fact the traditional strategy that we have aimed to follow. Say, for example, that we have actually developed a training module to give training about the concepts of agribusiness along the supply chain of agriculture industries to the mid-level managers, those who are already in the job or already in the industry, so that they know actually how to deal with the agricultural products and foods from product that is from the field to plate, that is paddock to plate, and so that sort of training we just aiming. But in terms of developing the courses and curriculum in agribusiness, so that is from the institute itself, it will be just reviewing the requirement of the local context and how it would fit, because agriculture industry, it is really very diverse industry. You have crop industry, you have animal-based industry, you have plant-based industry. So I as I said, that very conventional way we are thinking, but I understand that the world is moving very fast in terms of the information technology, and Bangladesh has recently, we call it that digital Bangladesh. So everywhere is now coming under the network internet system. So many apps are being developed to disseminate or promote the technology or information. But as an economist, I mean, obviously, I don't know much about the technical aspects. So I am very much eager to learn and how this what is that called, the artificial intelligence or AGI would be helpful. I am very much interested to learn and apply if it is possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Because of subject matter expert, I want to ask this question to Professor Rob, then David Smith, then Dr. Tamanna, and Dr. Madam Ali Rice. I'm coming to you. Professor Rob, you know that we have traditional approach. Professor Nazrul said, let's say we have undergraduation for 4 years.
Excuse me. Actually, you have to pardon me. I am talking over my phone. I have to charge my phone. Just I am going to take the.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Okay.
Thank you for joining.
Okay. I'll be back.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Professor Rob, as you know, that traditional education, it took around 4 years for undergraduation program, what the Northside University professor said. On the other hand, we see that Google and many industrial giant, they actually bring the education for 6 months. Like anybody can be business analyst in 6 months, and they can join in the industry. What do you think? Our traditional education need to reform or restructures or change? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Education for too long has kind of been goal in and of itself. You go to college, you're working for a degree for what appears to be a certification that has no basis in reality, at least with regard to a particular job or opportunity you're coming out with. That's very different than education was before around the Industrial Revolution, where people were trained as apprentices, and they ranked up as journeymen and masters in each of their field, and you knew at a fairly young age whether you wanted to do it or not, what your career path was going to be. If your dad was a carpenter, chances are you were going to be a carpenter. If you were a woman, you're going to be raising kids. I mean, that was you knew what your outcome was going to be. Whether it was ideal for you or not was at the time kind of irrelevant. Well, we've provided people with a lot of opportunities, but we haven't really provided them with any more direction per se as to which opportunities would be best for them. And what Google and a number of companies, including Intel, has discovered that it's sometimes better to acquire somebody that doesn't have a degree and then actually train them in the jobs they will be doing. And in a much shorter period of time, you have somebody that's productive. Too often, students are coming out of school and they're unemployable. We're having a major problem right now with Generation Z and initial turnover that's approaching about 6 months of survival in business. They come out, they hit work, and after about 6 months, they say, "Yeah, it's really not for me," and they've moved back home. That's problematic. It means we're not making people ready for the world that they're going to be entering. We don't. And when I was going through school, we had classes like home economics and auto shop and things that at least trained us into maintaining the stuff that was around us and teaching us how to live alone. We don't do much of that anymore. The kids go through math without really any understanding of how to apply it. They go through. They're taught history, and often their parents and relatives are telling them the history they're being taught is wrong. So they're not taught how to apply the lessons of history to the things they're considering today or tomorrow. And for the most part, we're doing a really horrible job of trying to help kids not only navigate their personal lives, but navigate their professional lives. What kind of training do we give them on social interaction business? You know, we don't even train kids on dating behavior. That we give very different directions to women and men as to how they are to behave on dates, and very often conflicting directions on how they are to behave on dates. And then we wonder why we have such large problems with regard to assault, abuse, and misogyny. It's because we're not working to fix any of that stuff when we need to fix it, which is when kids are young, when they're in their formative ages. So when we're talking about college, really there needs to be a much tighter focus on what it is the kid is going to do once they graduate. It's less about the degree. We're quickly finding out the degrees right now are almost worthless. Yeah, they do kind of imply that you have a social network that you might be able to use post-degree, but in terms of skills, they're not performative at all. Let's take a particular class of study, say law school. I was pre-law. One of my closest friends came out of law school and quickly discovered that he knew nothing about how to practice law. He knew a lot about law, but he didn't know how to practice it. He didn't know the mechanics of practicing law, the kind of research that needed to be done, the prep that you need to do for cases, even the writing skills that you kind of needed to develop and have a practice. Those were all conveyed for the most part when you first worked for a law firm, and they taught you how to actually do the job, which means, well, why did you go to law school to begin with? In fact, some states here in the United States are saying, yeah, you don't really need to go to law school anymore. All you need to do is pass the bar exam. And once you pass the bar exam, you can get a job as a lawyer, and you'll probably be as good as anybody coming out of law school, which hasn't made the law schools particularly happy at the moment. So yes, education really needs to go back and try to discover what it is it needs to do in order to validate its existence. And what it's supposed to do is turning kids into adults and making them into good adults. And that means they need to be well-rounded. They need to understand the personal economics at the very least. They need to know how money works. They need to know the importance of savings. They need to know that their parents aren't always going to be there to pay for their health care, and that needs to be covered. Different states and different countries have different rules, but they need to understand the rules they have to live under and have to operate through. So education is doing a piss poor job of preparing kids for the world they're going to enter. Now, AI can help. This is something that I've been an advocate for a while, is focusing AI on a lot of these fundamentals. Because what AI can do, if it's properly trained, is look at historic data and then apply what you know about the student against that historic data, and then make a recommendation as to a path, a career path, a learning path. I mean, something other than, yeah, you need to follow your parents, or you need to figure out a way to stay in school as long as possible so you don't actually have to earn a living, which has been kind of problematic, I think, for a lot of kids going forward. But AI can help with that. But again, developing a large language model for education, $100 million, who's going to fund it? Now I view from a standpoint of industry that industry probably should fund it, because it makes no sense to me, as you pointed out in your example, that companies are now deciding, and some I work with, Intel being the biggest one, saying that, yeah, we don't really need a degree. What we need to know is if you've got a good work ethic, if you work well with others, if you lack the kind of social dysfunction that can be disruptive in a company, then we want to talk to you. We'll bring you in low, but we'll train you up to the job we want you to do. And that having a far higher success rate than taking kids with degrees, particularly advanced degrees out of college, is problematic. It's just showing that education is becoming redundant. And I don't think education should become redundant. It just needs to be refocused on doing what it was supposed to always do: prepare children for their jobs and lives of adults, and making sure that they're well balanced when they hit the workforce, and they don't crash and burn in 6 months and get fired, or find themselves on any variety of drugs and exiting from society. I'm surrounded by massive numbers of homeless where I live, and largely due to the fact that they were inadequately trained, inadequately parented, and now they find themselves in a life they can't dig out of. And now we're trying to deal with these problems after the fact, which is incredibly expensive. And a lot of these homeless people actually have college degrees, which just boggles my mind. So getting college and universities back to the point where they're being measured on the success of their students post-graduation, I think would fix a lot of this. And where colleges are publicly, and they are kind of ranked, we just don't publish the rankings as often as we should, but where universities and colleges are ranked not on the number of people that graduate or the amount of money that they collect from donors, but on the success of their students post-graduation, and measuring success not just on economic metrics, but on holistic metrics that include their quality of life. Because having a bunch of folks out of Harvard that you wouldn't even have over to your house for a party if you had a choice is problematic. And with kids that hate them, and multiple marriages, that's not my idea of success. You really want to have an education that's holistically focused, so when the child graduates, they're ready for the real world, and they'll be a success in their own mind, not just economically, but socially, and really an asset to society, as opposed to yet one more liability. Because we've got way too many people right now that are liabilities to society, and I'd like to see education help fix that. So that's my comment on that question. Thanks.
Excellent. Professor David Smith, you are from Texas, Austin. We know that Elon Musk heavily invests in STEM educations, especially in Austin. He is investing $100 million for STEM educations. So I find that especially the young generations, they have a huge interest about Elon Musk. So what is the initiative? How does it work? And how it will be benefit for STEM education?
Well, his investment in a new school, and it's actually, think of it as more of a school system, because he is planning for it to be all the way from elementary school through college, is very interesting, and is one that I'm personally following closely because of some of the nuances of it. The other thing that's happening here in Austin Truth that I think you and Rob might find interesting is we have our first high school that just opened, not public school, but private high school, that is teaching entirely by using artificial intelligence. And they will have monitors for it, but the instruction is being done all digitally by using AI and tools like that. I don't believe AI is quite there yet, much like what Rob said earlier and I said earlier. There's still tremendous bias in the data sets. We ran a model against the pile, Rob, and our bias efficiency rate on it was just horrible. And we ended up abandoning that training session with it just because of what we saw with the biases in the data there. And Rob also mentioned Twitter. Well, Twitter has the same problem because you have the biases, and the biggest challenge today as you go towards AGI and advanced AI forums is finding training systems for your LLMs that have moderate bias. They're always going to have bias. Society has bias. So it has to have some concept of bias in it and tools to balance bias. But Dr. Sharif, with what we're going to see with that Elon Musk is doing with his education things, what we see with what's happening with this AI-led high school, and what we're seeing in corporate training. I was going over some information from one of the professional societies in professional training, and they are increasingly going to AI-enhanced training as well, with the same challenges we just talked about. So training has to reform. Rob, Dr. Sharif, Donald, great seeing you here. You've heard me say in the past that education hasn't changed much since the times of Socrates, and it really hasn't. What I think, though, and particularly in higher education, we're going to see dramatic transformation over the next 5 years that will take and change how we're going to be do future education, because education today is now a lifelong concept. It's not something you go and do, go work, then go back to. It's lifelong now. And if you're not learning today continuously, you're going to be left behind. And I think that's where we're going to see these education things like what Elon Musk is trying to institute here in Austin Bees will be built around the concept of lifelong learning.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Donald, you are from Silicon Valley. When I was in Dubai and we are developing a conference, an institution for impact investment and knowledge economy, that time we are discussing with the Vice Chancellor of New York University, and she shared her view about Stanford University in Silicon Valley. So we have our professor from North South University. They are also like a Silicon Valley, like Stanford University for Bangladesh. So what do you think? How university can play a role for knowledge economy, especially developing AI expert for industry?
Well, I think the most important thing to understand is that AI doesn't do anywhere near what people kind of say it does. For instance, 91% of all AI models, I've got actually about 5 papers here. One of them's really interesting, is where they took a standard, I think ChatGPT, one of the standard things, and they asked it to compute primes and asked it whether a certain number was a prime. And then they waited for a few months and they asked it the same question. And originally it got it quite accurate. And after a few months it had degraded and it gets worse. So basically the problem with AI models is that like if they go out and read the internet and they decide what's going to be true based on what they found on the internet, they're going to find out that, you know, sacrificing chickens will cure colds. They're going to find out every single solitary ridiculous thing that any human being's ever said. And that's all going to be incorporated into the knowledge base that they have. There was an article in Nature 6 months ago or so where they decided to see if AI could help them write scientific papers. and it would write very nice, very good, clear, perfectly organized scientific papers that were absolutely wrong. And it would make up references, and they look very nice, perfectly formatted in APA format, and all, things were footnoted, and none of it was true. And so they tried then to go through it and check it all. And based on what they checked, they thought, well, since the paper's so well written, we'll just fix the references and see what we can do and see if we can turn this into a real paper. And it took far, far longer than it would have if they just wrote the paper themselves in the first place. So basically, fundamentally, you have to understand that the information that you get from ChatGTP or anything else like that, there's no reason to believe that it's accurate, and there's very good reasons to believe it's not accurate. They call it hallucinations when the chatbots just make stuff up. Interestingly, and so doing it for education, I can see is a little problematic if there's some aspect of education where you actually need to have some reference to what we consider to be true or factual or things like that, because AI it's like Donald Trump. It's completely fact-free. It just makes up whatever it wants and says it with, and it's so funny. Just today on Facebook, somebody wrote about having an argument with, I think it was ChatGTP, but it was one of the bots. And it said it was just so pompous and passive aggressive and absolutely certain it was right about things. But of course it wasn't. It was wrong. But it's very, very, very fierce about how accurate and correct it is. So, I mean, that seems a little bit of a problem when you're trying to use it for education. I mean, and one of the biggest doofus brains about all of this is Elon Musk, and he's getting sued more and more for making claims that are absolutely ridiculous. And he's gone gone crazy. He never was an engineer. He dropped out of Stanford. He was a trust fund baby that had a whole bunch of money, and he's good, smart. He was really, really good at getting money out of the government. So he managed to get them to save Tesla when it was going, because Obama was so into electric cars. But he's not somebody I have a particular respect for. So the idea, my personal view of education is that one of the things that you get is to learn shit detectors, as we put it. And that has to do with starting out not believing anything. Like, if somebody tells you something, the best strategy is to not believe them. And say, okay, well, that's very, very interesting. That's something that it sounds very, very interesting, but I need to find out how did you arrive at that? Why are you saying this to me? Or, why have you written this? And then you go and you look at what led that person to believe that. And then you try and find things that contradict it. And you try and find other people. So, for instance, you'll get something on Twitter saying, "Oh, I don't know, some kind of outrageous thing that somebody said or done. Biden's done this, or somebody's done this," and you look at it, and people just immediately retweet it. So all of a sudden, it goes all around, and everybody's sure that this is something that's actually happened. But I look at that and I go, I don't believe it. And so I start if I think it's interesting enough, I start Googling it. And if, a newspaper in France says it, and The Economist says it, and the New York Times and the Washington Post all say the same thing, well, then I'll say to myself, okay, well, I'm going to conditionally believe this. This is something that's got a much, much higher probability of being true. But the point where I'm going with that is, we don't even know how to decide what's true or a fact our own selves as human beings. And so we don't really know how to program computers to be able to do that. They're not able to fact check. And the question is what is the processes that we use to be able to do that? And to me, education is about learning to be able to do that. And certainly you learn, you can learn technical skills. Like when I first started programming was considered to be kind of a low level thing that people did. It wasn't considered to be high level. And then they invented computer science, and all of a sudden it became, scientific. But in a lot of ways, programming is, sort of like building cars or something like that. I mean, putting together cars in some ways. So, there's like trades, being a carpenter and things like that, very respectful, wonderful things to do, but they're not. But in addition, people should learn to be educated and be able to ask questions and understand and drill down and try and find things that are facts or true. I say those in quotes because we never, I don't believe in absolute truth, but nonetheless, that's
Thank you.
what I have to say.
Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what you want to discuss about STEM education for women in India? Dr. Tamanna.
I just want to make a brief comment on this. What I'm trying to say is that ethics overall is a challenge for the society as such, for the whole human civilization. The situation we have reached right now, ethicality of things are extremely questioned. How people behave, why do children behave the way they do, and because of AI and many of these things, I guess there is a reduction in these things. So how could you train AI, or can AGI itself bring about these address these problems? For example, many people are questioning right now, can AGI be a god? So what you asked me right now about women, I mean, obviously feminists would love to have access to AGI technology for women. And as in India, for example, because there is a increasing interest in AI and AI education everywhere. We have AI based education happening, so we want more women to come in. And obviously the more the better, because women can have their own perspective on things. They can speak from the voice of difference. I mean, how they feel about it. Uh, do we need neutrality, or do we need difference based society? So we can have an AGI which can address these problems, because this is a major question which the civilization needs to answer. Should we have equality, or should we have difference? What kind of difference? So I mean, that is what they would like to, I mean, women would like to address these problems. And so in this, the philosophy of feminist would be totally compiled in a way, big way. Women would be able to understand where they stand. For example, lately, we had a debate on menstruation. So women were saying, one of the women MPs of society of India said that menstruation is not something which affects women personally. So here an equality kind of thing argument was made. But there would be other feminists who would say no, because there were many in the West, for example, in Iris Young, etc. The whole philosophy of justice and politics of difference. So she said that difference do count, and women are different. So we need there is a solid division between feminists themselves as well as the other philosophers on this particular issue. So probably we could address these. So ethics, I mean, is a big issue in a broader way to be addressed by the world.
Definitely, we need a very good policy for AI. Madam Ali Rais, what you want to share about STEM education for women from Britain?
Okay, because I was thinking about their education. My son's just gone to university. Actually, they've also gone to an outstanding school that's a state school. And what's interesting about their school, as well as because I think the foundation comes from the home. So essentially, a child's behaviour usually reflects the way that they've been brought up and the way that the parents conduct themselves. So that kind of ability to communicate, connect, and is kind of there because it's part nature, part nurture, but it's nurtured. And essentially, for me, I'm surrounded by young people that are well informed, intelligent, ask questions, think for themselves. My daughter turns 16 on the 21st of December, and she is a very emotionally intelligent, very capable young woman. And I think the thing is that there needs to be equality and equanimity, but men and women obviously have difference, and that difference should be celebrated. So we don't want to be like men, and there's a place for men and women. It's at the table, at the forum, wherever it is. And there's something about a woman's kind of gentility, and I think there's feminine power, and ultimately we are the ultimate creators because we give birth to the children. And I think the thing is that very kind of ability as just and I think one of the things that does happen is you do have to strike a balance so that you're there for your children and you still work. And essentially, for me, I've always put my children first. And that's why one of the reasons I really think that they're very focused and balanced and know what they want to do. And essentially going back to the AI, and Kota's studying a film course, and the particular film course that he's studying is preparing for him to enter the industry. And if you look at the graduates that leave, most of them do get work within the industry within 6 months of leaving. And essentially, and there were lots of courses that he looked at, but this particular one, I think it's the only one that uses the software that the industry does. And I can't remember what it's called, but anyway. So, and essentially, I think the thing is that for me, education is really important, but most important of all, and I'm part of the Genius U network with Roger James Hamilton. And I think the most important thing is that if we establish where our gifts and talents lie, that actually helps us focus forward and find our way, forge our way through. And my children have thought since they were little, they've got awards in the areas that they've loved, and they're passionate about. And essentially, I think in an ideal world, that's what would happen. And maybe AI kind of would be an enabler to kind of connect all those things together. And it's the interconnection of things that's really important. And I think education, is to be a lifelong learner and still be in awe and wonder of the world every time you wake up in the morning, whether you're 18 or 54 or 90, is that's what life should be about, really. So and I think because the community also is massively important. We live in a rural community, but it's a small community that looks out for itself. So or looks after each other. So and I just think that all the AI things that they do need to enable people. They need to be enablers to make better quality lives for people and give people more access. So that it's not determined by how much money it costs to study or learn or. And the thing is that there are people that are naturally gifted and talented that you don't have to do I think the arts is one of the things when your gifts and talents are very obvious very early on. So I think the thing is and for me, I think most people are fulfilled if they do what they love. Even if they have bad days, they still keep coming back. So for me, in an ideal world, that's what this generation and the generation I don't know whether my kids are generations, but their generation has huge ambition and hopes for the future, and probably will, as I think now, find solutions to the problems that for some reason our generations and those before us haven't. So I've got high hopes for this generation. And obviously, that's from my perspective, because I've got kids that are, teenagers, nephews that are teenagers, that are succeeding and making a difference and doing what they love.
Thank you. Professor Nazrul, what's the closing remarks you want to share with us?
Well, thank you. I was listening very carefully, and thanks all the speakers. One thing just I would like to share that with the name, that when we talk about artificial intelligence, I have the feeling that it is artificial, it is not natural intelligence. So behind that artificial intelligence, there should be someone, to prepare it to reflect the intelligence of the natural intelligence, that means human intelligence. So it's a human is making a program so that that program can actually analyze and synthesize the data that will be incorporated, and based on the program, the result or the act or anything that will be actually the output of the intelligence. I just give you one example that just yesterday I was actually using a program, linear programming modeling, just using the data I came across for that is called the how the decision makers decides among different options or criteria. There is a method called best and worst method. If there are many analytical hierarchy approach, the decision-making behavior, how the decision makers decides. So over time, actually, it is evolving, and I found that the best and worst method is more consistent. That is, the consistency can be reduced, and the ranking of the options could be actually more realistic. But I find that behind that you have to collect data, and you just just get the pull the decision makers. But if it is nationally, or if it is a factory, or if it is an industry, you just call the decision maker and give them the options. So just they do, they choose the best criteria and compare pairwise comparison time is done, and then you do analysis. Now, when you put your data into the program, if your original data is not, reflecting the real situation, obviously your artificial intelligence, that means the information that you would generate, perhaps will not be, reflecting the real situation. But we have to compromise in many ways. Obviously, we need, as an economist, I believe that we have limited time, limited resource, and within that resource, we have to allocate, you choose options and then come to a best decision, so that our level of satisfaction is maximized. So obviously, what I understood, that artificial intelligence is the way that we should go, but particularly we can use that aid to analyze our thought process very quickly and fast, and we can get some realistic outcome. And then again, obviously, natural intelligence must be used to get ultimately final decision. That's what actually I got from the discussion today. So as I say that I'm learning about this, but I find that when the term use artificial intelligence, that means it is not natural. It is just artificially made intelligence based on the real intelligence, incorporating, developing different modeling and formulas and all these things, programming. So
thank you.
That's what I understood.
Thank you, Professor Nazrul. Beside that, World Talent Economy Forum has board of advisor panel, like Professor Rob and Professor Donald, David Smith. They are part of our board of advisors, and we have our fellow as well, like Dr. Tamanna and Madam Ali Rice. I want to invite you in our board as a board of advisors, so we can work together, so we can go for brainstormings and make our plan for futuristic education.
Okay. Yeah, obviously I'll be a student there.
Okay, thank you. Professor Rob, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, artificial intelligence is moving very quickly. I've just finished a tour of several companies that are now using it massively inside, and the end result is product development rates are increasing at an unbelievable rate. The Intel, for instance, on their latest processor, it was due out end of next year. Is now being brought in significantly, and this is an industry where things tend to drift out. They don't get pulled in ever, largely due to the use of artificial general intelligence. Wharton has finished their study earlier with ChatGPT-3 and indicated productivity jumps of up to 80%. And that's with ChatGPT-3, the now obsolete version of the underlying program. It speeds up things very quickly. Microsoft, originally Windows 12 was going to be due somewhere around 2028. Now looks like it's going to show up 2024. Massive jump in terms of being able to do it. And the operating system, for the most part, is kind of writing itself at this particular point. I mentioned Intel, Hewlett-Packard, their Wolf Security Group has rotated to artificial intelligence massively, mostly to create AI-based defenses for the wave of AI-driven malware that we're about to be beat to death with in the next few months. It's already started to show up. Now AI is dropping messages in line, which means if you're in a conversation with somebody, suddenly you may be responding to the AI and not to the person anymore, and that AI may be hostile. And so you think you're in the midst of a conversation with a friend, a coworker, or a boss, or even your CEO. And in the midst of that conversation has been hijacked, and you're not talking to the AI, and you have no way of telling the difference. We've got AI deployments in news offices now. South Korea is the most aggressive, using avatars that are indistinguishable from the real people that are doing news programs. For the most part, this is being done so that news broadcasters don't have to come in from home for snap news events, or if the individual is sick or unable to attend at the last minute, they can switch to their avatar, and the audience can't tell the difference. This goes well beyond deepfakes now. But mentioning deepfakes have gotten a lot better. You can find places where you name the celebrity, they're advocating for a particular product or outcome, or you name the politician and they're doing whatever somebody wanted them to do publicly. And again, it has become very difficult. They're tricks, but those tricks are becoming obsolete in terms of being able to determine whether they're artificial or not. Our choice now is really to either get on board with AI, learn it, understand it, and defend against it, or we're going to be overcome with a lot of this stuff. It's moving very rapidly. As I mentioned early on, my biggest concern is now AI is writing itself, and the tools that have been developed using Microsoft's Copilot, for instance, the low-code, no-code development tools have sped up development massively. But AI, turns out, can issue commands far more successfully than people. In fact, I'll point out the feedback I got talking to the Intel executives when I was talking to them, where is it working, where is it not? And they said, well, where it's working is when people have figured out how to actually make queries. Our biggest problem right now is people don't know how to ask the questions. And if you don't know how to ask the questions, it can take you forever to get to an answer, because you're iterating. You have to keep iterating because you're going to get bad answer a new question, bad answer a new question, ask a new question, bad answer, ask a new question, bad answer. But if you can articulate what you want clearly, succinctly, and completely, you only iterate a couple times, and now your speed goes up massively. Artists, of course, are very concerned because the way these AIs are being trained is an existing art. But their problem, and the problem I'm undoubtedly going to find in court, is that's the way people are trained as well. So the very artists that are complaining about their work being derived in AI have undoubtedly derived their own work from what they've studied and learned from. And that's going to be the defense. How is AI doing anything different than these artists did to develop their own skills? Because they all learned from somebody else. They weren't a clean slate as a baby. They took classes. They saw other artwork. They chose a particular path based on what it was they observed. Well, the only difference between AI is AI can observe a crap ton more than any human can possibly observe, and its derivative work is far harder to connect back to the parts that it was derived from, unless it was directly requested. So what will still get you into trouble is if you say, I want a Harry Potter book that was never written before, and now you want to sell it. By the way, if you want to create a Harry Potter book that's never written before and you just want to read it, that you can do, and you generally won't get in trouble for it. That falls under fair use. But as soon as you try to sell that thing, you're going to find out that there are copyrights that you will have undoubtedly violated. And that's one of the biggest problems we have right now with AI, is how to draw that line, how to draw the line between what AI is doing, whether what it's doing is illicitly stealing from others, or whether it's simply such a highly derivative work that you can't trace it back to any one author, and it can be seen by others as being unique. I've listened to orchestra music that was both created and written by an AI, and at least to my ear, I couldn't connect it to anything else. And it's pretty amazing. NVIDIA pretty much opens every one of their events with orchestrated work that was both generated and written by an AI. The initial stuff was actually done by a real orchestra, but the later stuff is AI generated, and I challenge anybody to tell the difference. The only reason we're not playing video games against AI generated NPCs, that's non-player characters, artificial intelligence driven, is because the damn things are too expensive. It's not that we can't create them. It's just that they're too expensive in terms of resources, both to create and run. And that's one of the big issues right now we've got with these large generative models. They are incredibly resource intensive. They are even in their relative infancy, bringing data centers to their knees. And so we're moving to a concept called hybrid AI, where much of the activity is done on the devices, the remote devices, and only the heavy lifting is done in the cloud. But that's opened up a whole series of new interesting problems in terms of the introduction of bias and controlling the quality of the outcome. Because while you can protect a data center pretty well, it's pretty hard to protect your laptop to that same degree unless you want to live in a skiff. And so the end result is, for these next few years, we're going to be really exploring what it means to use these tools and to use them properly, and really trying to move against some of the hostile creations that folks like Elon Musk are creating that are undoubtedly going to do a ton of damage. And as they release, having somebody with his kind of money floating around here without a whole lot of control is incredibly concerning, particularly after we saw what he did to Twitter. So the end result is that we are going to need a certain amount of regulation. We're going to need a certain amount of control over this. And of course, with any regulation, control comes with a certain amount of education going into the regulators that doesn't exist at the moment. Now, I mentioned AI with regard to education and how it should be used. Predominantly, it should be used for simulation right now and to train students how to actually execute queries. As I'm observing this, and we didn't get through this, we had the same problem when the internet came to market. When we first had the web, we knew that the web was created around Boolean logic. Sorry, I added an extra constant there. Boolean logic, and yet we didn't move to training people in Boolean logic. Those of us that came out of analytics and analysis, we knew that as a matter of course. And so I've done very well using that particular tool, and it's part of why I've been so successful in my career. But I've been just flabbergasted that we haven't moved to teaching kids aggressively how to use that particular tool so they could make those rudimentary queries much more successfully. Well, it's much more difficult with generative AI. You really have to think through your query. There's an old joke that was been floating around for a while. It's not that old, but ever since we had generative AI, about IT being concerned that we're going to be displaced by computers. And person says, well, yes, but the user has to be able to articulate what they want. And the IT guy says, oh, then we're safe. The user is never going to solve that problem because they never have solved that problem. And in fact, if you've ever worked with an IT team, and I have on several occasions, to create something, you will find almost dramatically that either the IT team isn't listening to what it is you want, or you haven't articulated it properly. And one of the big problems is when you're talking to IT or a technician, is your basis for language is often very different. Your background, how you use words, and how an engineer uses those same words, whether either software or hardware. And so you get that communication disconnect between the person that's asking the question and the person that's trying to carry carry forward the answer. Well, that gets massively problematic with AI, because AI, it might take a person months or years to execute a detailed query or request. AI can do it in minutes. In fact, coupled with 3D printers and automated manufacturing, which we're aggressively moving to, you could find you actually have a product at the end of the quarter that is fundamentally non-functional because the person that asked the question, that made the request, did not ask it properly and did not carry it through. The kinds of things we need to be teaching kids, how to articulate their desires, how to put together a sentence, a paragraph, a paper, so it clearly delineates what it is that they want. They need to understand cognitive bias. They need to understand confirmation bias, particularly confirmation bias, which plagues all of us. That's where you look at a particular answer that you like, and you don't look underneath it. We all can have a tendency to challenge things we don't believe in, or that violates our worldview, but we do not tend to challenge things that we agree with, and that becomes a massive problem. So overcoming confirmation bias has to be something they need to be trained aggressively from a young age. And then the other thing that we need to really focus on is results. Degrees aren't results. Grades aren't really results. And to a certain extent, they're a measurement. But results should be connected to some type of a hard task that's connected to the real world at some particular point. We have to take the kids back to how are they going to perform in the world. Math has to be, to a certain extent, applied math early on. It can be theoretical. Theoretical research is very important, but only a small number of people go into that particular direction. The vast majority of us are going to be asked to actually do things, and training kids and into doing things and loving the things that they do becomes just so incredibly important for a happy life. I know just too many people at their end of their life, and a lot of us are older here and approaching retirement, that look back at their life like it's been a total waste. And what's the point? That this is something they should have been taught early on, that if you're on the wrong path, feel free to change paths and find something that you like. If you're doing a job that you enjoy, time goes by and it doesn't really matter. You enjoy it. It's fun. And if you're doing something you hate, you live for weekends. And you often are going to have substance abuse problems as you try to escape the misery you've locked yourself in. You can escape that. We need to teach kids how to escape misery, how to avoid bosses that abuse them, how to respond to physical threats without using physical violence. These are core skills that we are not conveying, and then we're surprised that some of these children are dysfunctional when they come into the market. We need to measure education in terms of student success in the real world, and not much on anything else, and move away from artificial grading that has no connection to real world performance. I'm not saying completely. Obviously, there's some things you're going to have to use artificial grading to accomplish, but we've so far separated from what kids need to do as adults that it's really brought, as Sharif, you mentioned earlier on, to the point where a lot of companies are saying, screw the degrees, screw the grades, screw the schools. We want to see how ethical you are. We want to see how what your work ethic is. We want to see how you treat others. And we want to see how you behave, because all of these things are important to us, and we can teach you almost anything. The effort that Intel has in Israel is a case in point. They were having a real hard time getting people talented people to run the fabs in Israel. And what they found was that they go out and find folks, a lot of them homeless, but that they had a real work ethic. They'd been in the military. That they, if you gave them a job, they would complete the job. They really wanted to work, and they enjoyed working, and they could train those people out. And now these people are winning awards. They're outperforming their degreed peers because they focused on the outcome. They didn't focus on the interim steps without any connection to reality. And we have to get around this. Remember, AI can be used for simulation. You can take kids and put them in the real world without any risk, much like you can take automobiles that are self-driving and you can put them in a simulation. If they run into 80 million cars and kill 40 million virtual people, nobody actually dies. Simulation is great for that. It can teach consequences when kids are an age where they don't understand consequences. It can make better people, but only if we focus it on that task. Finally, we need to understand where these tools are effective and where they're not, and accept the fact that this is a changing metric. These tools are advancing incredibly quickly. These are the tools we've got this year are nowhere near what we had last year. Far more advanced, far more capable. And the stuff that's coming out in the next quarter, it'll blow your socks off. And we're nowhere near the development rate that we're going to be by the end of the decade. If you don't like change, this is going to be a horrible decade for you, because this stuff is advancing faster than anything has ever advanced. Look at ChatGPT to begin with. It is blown away everything that preceded it in terms of adoption and advancement. And it's not even the most developed tool we've got out there. The Google tool that just came to market is arguably better. And we've got a couple things coming out of China that are absolutely frightening. So be aware, this is an area that's going to change very quickly. And if you're a fixed focus person, this is not going to be the decade for you at all. Get ready for change, because if you don't like it, it's going to beat you over the head all decade long and for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your closing remarks in 2 minutes?
Oh, 2 minutes. AI is happening. AI is moving rapidly. You're going to see AI begin to focus more on focus industries versus some of the general industries, to get over the bias problems, to get over that. Education, training, always very important on this. Every industry will be touched by AI and potentially by AGI. So Sharif, thank you.
Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your closing remarks in 2 minutes?
Well, I think the most important thing to realize is that AI, what we call AI, does what it does, and it's an incredibly valuable tool, and it's got like very hard limits. Like right now, for instance, the large language models, you know, they get up to a billion variables, and then 10 billion variables, and then 1 trillion variables, and 10 trillion variables. But you reach a point where that actually isn't buying you get huge amount of diminishing returns. So, and plus you get up to those things, and it takes, you know, a coliseum full of GPUs to run it and get it to work. So it's using more power than one server center is using more power than a small country in Africa. And so we're going really far in one direction, but the whole idea that there's general artificial intelligence is we're not going towards that at all, because the things that everybody's been talking about, where they say, well, you need to have a person to ask the right questions. You need a person to interpret the questions. You need a person to do that. We need to train people to do that. Right. That's because AI can't do it. And the reason it can't do it is because we don't have any idea how to get it to do it. And so that's if you go and instead of to the trade magazines, go to Google Scholar and start looking up what's actually going on, like with the accuracy. And I'll just finish with this, saying that 2 years ago, they were talking about how AI was going to be the greatest thing for neurodivergent people. 2 years later, they tried it out and they found it was actually extremely detrimental to neurodivergent people. So people come and they say, oh, it's going to do this wonderful thing. It's already doing it. You know, we've got this and that and the other thing. And then you actually try it and do actual scientific research on it, and you find it doesn't work at all. In fact, opposite. So check Google Scholar instead of the trade magazines, and for a reality check on some of this stuff. And that's my time up. So goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what's your closing remarks in 2 minutes? Can you unmute, please?
You're muted.
Yeah, I guess I agree with all the panelists that this is a civilized century of change and rapid changes, and all of us are in classrooms right now. You know, I mean, we might have taught some time, but, you know, now we are in our classrooms. You know, we need to get back to classrooms, and I guess that is going to increase our age. You know, I mean, if people who are like 70, 80, you know, they're studying along with children who are like 5, 6, 7, amazing. It's like they can teach each other something which is brilliant, and AGI can kind of fuel these kind of conversations between the two. So I guess, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Alirais, what's your closing remarks?
Well, AI is here to stay, isn't it? And I think AI is quite subtle. So, I sat naved all the way to Cardiff and back yesterday, and if I was navigating using a map, it would have been much more difficult. So I think the thing is that the subtlety of AI is something that most of the time we don't even realize, but the tools and the potential to make things easier and more convenient and to give access, particularly to education's really exciting. So I think the thing is, as long as people make good decisions and it's about promoting a humanitarian kind of quality and fulfillment of life wherever you are in the world, then that would be a great way to go.
Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions, and thank you Professor Rob, Professor David Smith, Professor Donald, Dr. Tamanna, and Madam Alirais for joining today's sessions. World Talent Economy Forum, we are growing very fast. We are organizing our iLab, Innovation Lab around the world, as well as our summit. So hopefully all of your contributions will be more effective around the world, especially for emerging economy. Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. Thank you, bye-bye, and take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.